Good morning. Welcome to episode 124 of Duval Rundown. My name is Gus Logue. Today I'm joined by a very, very, very special guest, a man who needs no introduction. It is John Shipley of Jaguars on SI. John, welcome to the show for the first time. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good, man. Who would have thought?
Who would have thought?
Yeah, who would have thought? Yeah, whole throwback thing. 124 episodes. Is this outlived? I never counted, but it outlived.
No, I was going to say, so for those who don't know, John and I were previously co-hosts together on the Jaguar Report podcast. It is now the Jaguars on SI website and the Jaguars on SI podcast. John has been doing individual runs on there. Definitely worth checking out all of his work, including the podcast. But yeah, John and I think we did about 50 or 60 total Jaguar Report episodes.
We hit 100. We hit 100. Yeah.
Because we only did it like once a week, and I think it was really just for one full season and like maybe two off seasons. But
I counted all the old ones.
Yeah. Okay.
And we did like once every 3 months.
Yeah. Well, so as our guy Rachel said in the comments, the dream team is back. Let's go. John, today I've got a very special segment prepared since you're a very special guest. It's called Rate the Take. And so you, as former listeners of our previous show, Jaguar Report podcast, know you've, for lack of a better term, bullied me a little bit on my takesmanship or lack thereof. Bullying is definitely a strong word. But yeah, my takes have had to gradually improve thanks to John. And so I've got 3 takes for you today, John. One on James Gladstone, one on Liam Coen, and one on Travis Hunter. And we can just use my takes to segue into further conversations. How does that sound?
There's no Ezra Cleveland take this time?
No.
So when you had Justice on a few months ago, he hit me up and he was like, "Hey, who's this guy?" And I was like, "Oh, no, dude. Gus is awesome. Do his show. I can't recommend him enough. We used to pod together." He does your show and then hits me back. He goes, "Yeah, he said you bullied him." I was like, "Dude, what?" No, it was nurturing in the way of takes. We went from your takes being the Jaguars will play a football game to now you're a fully developed take artist. So let's roll. Let's do it.
All right. So rate my take. You can come up with the formula in terms of, or the scale of how you're going to rate my takes. 0 to 5 stars, 1 to 1,000,000 points, 0
it's
to
going to go from 1 to bulky ball.
1 to bulky ball. That's good. Yeah. I'm definitely going to get bulky balled a couple of times on this pod. All right. So first take, let's start out with, you want to start with Liam or James here?
Do Liam.
All right. So my take for Liam is that the Jaguars will finish top 5 in pretty much every passing metric or statistic in 2025, but they'll finish like below average, maybe like, so let's say bottom 5 in rushing metrics and rushing efficiency. And they're going to lose in the playoffs, and it's going to be because, with any playoff loss for a couple of different factors, but mostly because they can't run the ball, and they can't, like the same issue that has popped up throughout the Doug Peterson era pops up again, where like, especially in short yard situations, they just aren't able to move the sticks. And so then they spend their first round pick, or wait, actually they don't even have their first round pick in 2026. So already, but they'll spend their first pick in the 2026 draft on offensive line because they feel like they need to revamp that room the way that they go out in the playoffs in the 2025 season. And so my take for Liam Coen is that he'll generate a top 5 passing offense, but a bottom 10 rushing offense. So what do you think? You go ahead and roast me. Go ahead.
Dude, rate my take. You just give me 6 takes in one. There'll be a top 5 passing offense.
Yeah.
The rushing offense will stink. They'll spend the second round pick on an offensive lineman. They'll make the playoffs. They'll lose in the playoffs because of the rushing offense. And I'm pretty sure there was one other in there that I'm forgetting. That was just
okay. The take is like, I was just kind of like building the case for the take, but like the take is basically top 5 passing offense and bottom 10 rushing defense or rushing offense. And like I feel like a lot of questions with the offensive line and the running game in general. They did add to running back in the draft. They added to the interior offensive line in free agency. But I don't can you really say that the offensive line is like that much better on paper than it was in 2024? I feel like they could have a lot of similar problems in the run game, especially since like their offensive line coach is like, I don't even remember his name off the top of my head. I think it's kind of a relative unknown. Yeah, I feel great about the passing offense considering Trevor Lawrence, Brian Thomas, Travis Hunter, pretty much. But yeah, what do you think about? I guess it's more of like a Jaguars offense take, but Liam Cohen's the head coach and he's the play caller. So
yeah, no, for sure. I'll give the take a solid 6.5 stars out of 10.
Okay, I think that was my worst take among the three. So we'll start off slow and then gear up throughout the show.
Okay, good. Like I definitely agree. Like in terms of confidence in the Jaguars passing offense, top 5. I'm still just needing to see, because like for as much highly as I think of Trevor Lawrence and as much as I think he's a really talented guy who has just been in bad situations, both with roster around him, coaching, front office, injuries, etc., even himself at times, like I still need to see him produce like fake good numbers before I see like before I believe that he's going to just put up big, stat lines. It seems like even at times when he's playing well, outside of like a 3-game stretch in 2022, he just hasn't he's been the type of quarterback who plays well without putting up big numbers. You know what I mean? And
totally.
I know that, like the hope obviously is that changes with Liam Cohen. I'm just wanting to kind of see it a little bit first. I do think like in terms of how I scale, okay, what parts of the Jaguars are you most confident in? I do think the offense is definitely, in the passing offense more specifically, is one of them, because one, obviously I'm a believer in Lawrence's talents, but two, completely independent of how Cohen might be fit or how he might do as a head coach, I'm pretty confident in him as an offensive play caller and schemer, right? Like there's a small sample size, only 1 year really as a play caller in the NFL, but did really good. Did significantly better than Dave Canales did the year before. People legitimately believe Baker Mayfield is close to a top 10 quarterback, which I think we can agree. It's a complete fugazi. But the reason why is because he's able to scheme up production for the quarterback, easy production. I think the Buccaneers were like the best team in like screens last year, just in terms of production. What I did a story on it before the draft. I don't have it on hand, but it was like Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars, like they were really high in terms of screen volume the last couple of years, but in terms of like execution and efficiency, EPA, even just total yards, like they sucked. Whereas Tampa Bay, they just have a really good screen game. I mean, that was like one of the first things James Gladstone even said about Liam Cohen. He was like, yeah, his screen game is crazy, and it is. So I do think like to that extent that will help Trevor get some easy production. In terms of the running game, I personally think the offensive line, if you swap out their 3 interior guys last year, because in my opinion, I think Wyatt Milam's going to start at left guard and put in the 3 new guys and Wyatt Milam, Robert Hainsey, Patrick McCary. None of those 3 guys I think are like game changers, obviously. Yeah, exactly. X-Factors. But I do think it's an improvement overall, and I think one improvement is just the coaching on the offensive line side of the ball. Obviously, they didn't make a star-studded hire there either, but the offensive line just quietly over the last few years, just in terms of the development behind closed doors, was a mess. So I think just getting some stability will help there. But I will say it's not like universal that like people think the Jaguars offensive line has improved. I literally talked to somebody before the draft about the Jaguars who works for a different team, and he was like, yeah, I still think their line kind of sucks. So it's definitely, an area that like they're going to have to prove like their investments were smart. I think Liam's run scheme and how flexible he is and the way he schemes up the running game is just as impressive as what he does in the passing game. Like I think that's why Britton Strange will be so valuable for them this year. Not even like counting the couple dozen targets, he'll probably see over the course of the season, but he can be used as a versatile chess piece in the running game. So I think the running game will improve, but I would say they're closer to middle or of the pack, lower, third tier in the league, as opposed to being like a top rushing offense. So no, it wouldn't surprise me if the rushing offense, like I think it'll be better, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was just like, does that make sense?
Totally, yeah, and that's like where I'm at. Like, I think that we'll see for the running game. I think there certainly could be a big jump just based on like how bad the production efficiency was last season. But yeah, I would certainly expect for the passing offense to especially be really carrying the ship intended. But like For Trevor, I feel like in 2022 he did show a little bit of like steady high end production and performance, but it was in 2022, and like you were saying, like he was playing fantastic, and like it bared out in a good amount of numbers, but it's not like anyone was like, oh, this guy was like playing like an MVP caliber player for like the second half of the season. He was certainly playing like a great player for the second half of 2022 when they made that run to get back into the playoffs. But that's also like it's been a couple of years. He needs to stay on the field first and foremost. But in terms of Liam Coen, as Duval said, I went super galaxy brain. So to come back down to earth a little bit, a take that I had on yesterday's show, episode 123 with Hacker. I think like in terms of Jaguars, like with the most at stake or the most to prove in 2025, Liam Coen is for me at the top of the list. And like, so I don't know, like how much pressure do you think that Coen is under to succeed like pretty much immediately? Because like I'm just thinking that like we all know like what Tony Baselli is. He doesn't need to prove himself to anyone. I mean, obviously as like a player, and he's not a player anymore, but he did seem pretty instrumental in bringing both Gladstone and Coen into the building during the searching process in January and February. And then especially Gladstone, like even if it's a small sample and he's only had one off season, like the off season that the Jaguars have had has been pretty impressive in terms of like personnel moves. And so like we kind of know what James Gladstone and Tony Baselli are at this point, but Liam Coen as a first-time head coach, we're a little bit unsure. And so how much pressure do you think Liam is going to be under to succeed right away? Or do you think he's going to be given a pretty decent leash?
I think he'll be given a decent leash. I mean, just looking at, the contract he has, one of the highest paid head coaches, etc. I think they're all in on him being the guy of the future. I think they obviously want to be competitive and think they'll be competitive this year because, they know that they weren't really a 4-win team on paper last year. But then again, you're not a 12-win team on paper right now either. And so much of the roster is already overturned. I mean, they had, 11 free agents signed, 9 draft picks, 22 undrafted free agents. That's 42 new faces on the 90-man roster this season. Jump ahead to next year, and there'll be almost nobody left, from the Balky regime other than the handful of good players who they're, trying to build around moving forward. So I think, like, I don't know. Like, if I had to think of a situation, it reminds me of kind of the Minnesota Vikings when Kwesi and KOC got hired in 2022, when they were trying to both, I wouldn't say rebuild, but focus on the future while also trying to stay as competitive as possible. And the Vikings have had some, solid teams in that span. So I think that's what I would say the best comparison for the Jaguars is. I don't think it's like a lot of pressure on Liam Coen. Now, obviously, they can't go like 2-15 and give the Browns like the first or second overall pick. Like that can't happen. I don't think he'd be fired for it, but it would certainly, I think, put some pressure on some people. But I don't think there's any like win mandate or anything like that. So I think there's pressure in terms of don't give the Browns a top 5 pick. But I think outside of that, that's about it.
Yeah, I certainly don't think we'll be like talking about Coen being on the hot seat or even like anyone being on the hot seat in 2025 for the first year of like the new regime, the new coaching staff. But just from a general outside kind of point of view, like, again, we know like Gladstone has kind of done his job and now it's time for Liam Coen to do his job. But speaking of James Gladstone, here's a take on James Gladstone. James Gladstone will be the 2026 NFL Executive of the Year.
There you go.
Not in 2025, because I think even if the Jaguars have an amazing 2025 season and they get far in the playoffs, like it's mostly still Trent Baalke's roster. Like obviously they added 11 players in free agency, 9 players via the draft, but I think 12 players in free agency now that Ogba has been signed. But like the only like huge splash is Travis Hunter, which is obviously the biggest splash possible. But I think that like Gladstone won't really be considered for the award in 2025. But if he follows up this offseason with a couple of splash moves in 2026, and if the Jaguars make like consecutive playoff appearances, I don't know. I like the other one I was thinking is that like in 2 years' time, Gladstone will be generally known as like a top 10 NFL general manager. I think top 5 could be a little bit tough to crack just because there's so many like long-term GMs on like long-term franchises that have always been run well, like DaCosta with the Ravens, Howie Roseman with the Eagles. The list can go on and on. But like, I don't know. I do have one thing I'm a little bit nervous about with James Gladstone that I'll talk about after you rate my take. But go ahead and rate the take first. What do you think about James James
Yeah,
Gladstone.
I went with stars last time. This time I'll give you 4 out of 5 guesses. All right. No, I definitely like, as long as like some of these moves don't blow up in his face, I definitely see the path toward Gladstone becoming like one of like the really respected general managers for a couple of reasons. Obviously, he's a smart guy, modern guy, has his own unique and bold processes, which stands out to people. I think he's similar a little bit to Howie in that regard. He just kind of moves to his own, really similar to Les Snead too, which obvious, he learned a lot from him. I think that there is zero, like you are greatly underestimating the NFL media. There is 0% chance that the Jaguars go to the playoffs. There will be a single NFL media person that gives Trent Baalke credit. No, it will. Everybody, if the Jaguars go to the playoffs and Travis Hunter wins Rookie of the Year, I think James Gladstone is Executive of the Year. I don't think there's a single soul that would be like, no, this is Trent Baalke's team in the playoffs, other than Trent Baalke. I just, they've really kind of took a sledgehammer to the roster, at least in my opinion. They didn't retain, still haven't, a single free agent. They very clearly were down on a lot of, bulky guys. They haven't said Gabe Davis's name since they got hired. They not only drafted 2 running backs, but they want, like, if they were staying at 5, they were going to pick Ashton Genty. I think that is very clear and obvious to everybody now. Yeah. So they were open to replacing Trent's running backs with the number 5 pick. Then wanted RJ Harvey at 70, and then went ahead and drafted 2 running backs. So they clearly hated his offensive line, hated his running back, hated his wide receiver addition, hated his tight end room, hated his secondary. Seems like they think he built a good defensive line, but like literally everything else, I think I've seen like a pretty decent upheaval outside of the few guys that they just legit can't move on from right now, just because contractually they're just kind of like locked in. So I think that if the Jaguars make the playoffs this year and Hunter goes off, I think Gladstone gets at least consideration as the Executive of the Year. And I think another part of it is, and you can argue the value of this, which, there's certainly an argument to be made for and against it, but Gladstone is just more media friendly. I mean, was there any time during the Trent Baalke era where the entire NFL media, like the Jaguars, had them in the palm of their hands like they did during the first round of the draft or the day leading up to the draft? And part of that is, Gladstone is obviously very accessible. I mean, they had Mike Silver in the freaking, draft room. Right. Was that flying before? So, that has nothing to do with football, but I also think that helps the general perception of a person. And, especially in the media eyes, like how accessible are you willing to be? Because I don't think that's a reason why media people disliked Trent or anything like that. Everybody has their own reasons. Like Silver seems like he has lots of reasons. Have you ever read any of his tweets about him? But I definitely think Gladstone, if they're successful, will get the nod. I don't think anybody's going to be saying it was Trent's team. Really, who's going to give him credit for Trevor Lawrence? Anybody would have drafted, Trevor Lawrence. You can give him credit for Trayvon Walker, Tyson. Don't snort, don't chortle. Tyson Campbell, Foye Oluokun, and then other than their core guys, who really are you? Brian Thomas. Yeah, I'll give.
Maybe Walker Little has a really good 2025 season, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah. So other than that, I think most of the guys that would impact this season doesn't really have any relation to what the last Jaguars regime did. There is more change now than I think there was when the Jaguars new regime took over in 2021. Mm-hmm. And then even same when Doug Peterson took over in 2022, because then at least they had a lot of the old pieces. There just simply are a lot of old faces gone already, and a lot of old faces who seem like they have 1 foot kind of out the door already, in my opinion.
Totally. Okay, so I feel like this offseason has been kind of like a slam dunk, a home run, however you want to call it, for James Gladstone. My one concern for the future is that he's going to lean a little bit too heavily into the intangibly rich bit, where intangibly rich is easily the biggest buzzword that's come out of his mouth, come out of Jacksonville in general this offseason. I guess I'm worried that he's going to pull Brad Holmes in the Lions, where the Lions have their own identity of being hardcore blue collar, whatever you want to call it, guys under Dan Campbell, and they certainly have an identity of their football team. But I think that they are leaning a little bit too heavily into like their identity. Like the trade that the Lions made with the Jaguars is a good example. They gave up 3 third-round picks to move up for Isaac Tesla, who's supposedly like he definitely has like some good traits, height, weight, speed. But like
he's gonna suck.
Yeah, he's like mostly as like just like a really hard worker and like a try hard essentially. And so like I feel like the Lions are like leaning a little bit too far into the bit right now of like getting guys to like fit their culture. And so I think right now for like 2025, it makes a lot of sense to get like prioritize culture when you're literally rebuilding the culture. But I'm a little bit nervous that like down the line, James Gladstone is going to continue harping on intangibly rich. And obviously obviously that is important. Like that shouldn't just entirely go away. But I think he needs to have like also the mindset of like what Howie Roseman does and DeCosta does with Baltimore of like just taking good players when they're available. And I don't know. I'm a little worried he's going to lean a little bit too much into the bit. But what do you think about that?
You want him to take some intangibly using a firm to pay for Chick-fil-A players, don't you? That's what you want the nitty gritty. Not like that. I like that you refer to it as a bit. The funniest thing that I've heard come out of his mouth has been intangibly curious. Keeping my face straight. Like, I think it literally just means what every general manager means when they say like they're looking for a player. Like, I don't necessarily think it led them to like picking any players who are just like, wow, like you can't play, and they like took you because you're a choir boy. Like, yeah, I thought the Jack Kaiser pick was weird because I thought they needed other positions more in a linebacker, and obviously it seemed like their reasoning, for taking him was, outside of the special teams and linebacker depth, like you said, was the intangible stuff like that. But I still think they believe in traits. Like Tony Roselli has gone on record saying that. I've like heard him like doing an interview where he was like, people think we don't believe in traits anymore, like the height, speed, and explosiveness. We still do. Like that, just because they want like intangibly rich players doesn't mean like they want, to me, like slow, small players who are just high effort guys. Now, if they were just taking like a lunch pail guy with every single pick, I think that'd be a concern. But I still think like elite players like Travis Hunter is intangibly, rich, etc. Brian Thomas Jr., stuff like that. So I completely get what you're saying. I think if he starts trading up and like trades like 3 picks for like a special team safety who is a coach's son who has 0 chance of ever making an impact on defense, I think that's when you can kind of be like the Tesla pick's a good example. I think that's an absolute asinine pick. He went way higher than he should have on the consensus board. They trading that many picks to get him, etc. Like I'm with you. Sometimes these guys just get too confident in what they're, kind of looking for. The Lions, their old regime was a good example with Matt Patricia and I think it was Bob Quinn. Like they were looking for Patriot guys, and they took that really slow, terrible linebacker Duval in the 2nd round, etc. Because he was a Patriot kind of linebacker, dude who runs a 5 flat 40 and makes a lot of run tackles. So I think as long as you're not taking a decrease in talent, you're fine. And to me, I don't think they have so far. Like I think at like the very least they haven't made any like egregious reaches. Like, I did my thing on comparing their consensus board results to Bulky's, and like I think his biggest reach on the consensus board was Jalen McLeod, and it would have been like Bulky's like 9th or 10th biggest reach. So even like his reaches right now don't seem like that reachy. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think if he starts taking dudes like Raymond Vahasik, who is like 668 on the consensus board, then you can start to question, okay, is this kind of jumping the shark? But I think as long as he's still taking players mostly where they're valued, I don't think it's that. Like I think it's, like you said, kind of a buzzword. It to me, it literally just means they like experienced players with lots of starts who can play multiple positions and who like football. Because I know for a fact there were several guys who, like, leading up to the draft, like you could just tell, like they weren't going to be on their board. And this isn't like to harp on the stuff people were saying about him or anything, but like I couldn't fathom the amount of people who thought the Jags, like when they thought they were going to pick number 5, were going to take Ted McMillan, because that's just an example of like literally just like him. Like I personally don't care about it, but if he's saying, he doesn't really like football all that much, doesn't really watch it, I don't think that's the kind of player, like vibe wise, they would want to go after. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So
Yeah, I agree with all that. Like I was just like trying to find like a potential negative, because like I think this has been like a great offseason for Gladstone specifically. Like I don't necessarily expect for him to quote unquote lean into the bit and to like start like drafting overconfidently, but like that's just like one of the few negatives, like, possible outcomes I can think of.
I will say, did you watch his day 3 presser or read the transcript at all?
The transcript of it.
When he was asked about Kaiser, and he mentioned like him playing safety at the Senior Bowl, and he was like, more or less, we knew he would suck at it, but we're happy he did it. Was happy with doing it. Like, when you start to lean into that, that's okay.
He definitely said at some point, like draft weekend, like the number one thing that they were looking for like all of the guys that they drafted was just guys that love football. So that definitely makes sense. But Travis Hunter, definitely a guy that loves football. Let's talk about him a little bit. Rate the take, John. I was going to say at first, Travis Hunter will receive at least one MVP vote in the duration of his rookie contract. But I feel like I feel like I've seen that one somewhere or like around where like he's going to get MVP votes at some point. So I feel like it's not quite hot enough. So I'm going to say this. Travis Hunter will lead the 2025 Jaguars in both touchdown receptions and interceptions. What do you think about that?
I could see it, just because I think like they're obviously going to scheme him on offense, like ways for him to just literally win one-on-one, etc. And that's like the beauty of pairing him with Brian Thomas, is defenses just can't focus on either one of them. Like they can, but then that creates one-on-ones for the other guy. And I would expect out the gate more defensive coordinators are going to like focus on Brian Thomas Jr., at least early on, in Hunter's career, because Brian Thomas Jr. has already earned that kind of respect from NFL defensive coordinators. I can't remember who put it, but I saw one thing on Twitter where it was like Tampa Bay threw a lot more inside the 5-yard line than like compared to the Jags, who it seemed like every time the Jags got near the goal line, they like spammed like halfback dive, like, through the A gap. Like they were just, I don't know if they were like, I kind of feel like it was Doug was terrified of Trevor throwing an interception. And because that just seemed like that was like Doug's kind of vibe about Trevor. Whereas with Coen, it seems like he's a lot more willing to kind of, juice the quarterback stats a little bit inside the 5-yard line. I could see Travis Hunter being a big benefactor from that. I think defensively, like just his instincts and his ball skills, like I personally think as things stand today, I know what their plan is with him, but as things stand today, and I'd say they agree because they said his natural position was cornerback, but as things stand today, I think he's a better cornerback than wide receiver. Like he's such a freak athlete and freak talent that he's going to play well wherever he's at. Like his ball skills on offense, his yards after the catch, just athleticism. It's crazy. Like he's going to produce either way. But as a cornerback, just his instincts and his understanding of what offenses are trying to do, like that pick he had, he broke it down in a video, but I remember flying to Houston for the Week 4 game, and I was like, oh, I can watch the UCF game against Colorado on my way there, and I see him get just that completely outrageous pick where it seemed like he covered 3 different dudes at once. He's just an outrageous player. He is, before he takes a snap, and I don't care if this is hyperbolic, just pure athleticism and traits, one of the most talented players that they've had in franchise history, like up there with Tony, Jimmy, Freddie, Jalen Ramsey, etc. Easily, I think the most, like the biggest star power of any player I've ever covered in my career. Like Trevor Lawrence was a big deal for like football fans in 2021, but like I have like younger people in my family who like kids who like know who Travis Hunter is because like they watch him stream. like to them, he is like the Roblox player who also plays football. But and like those people don't know necessarily who Trevor Lawrence is right off the bat. Everybody, it seems like, knows who Travis Hunter is. I think he is a legitimate franchise changing type player. Normally, like, me, normally my philosophy is trading up is pretty stupid. And I like, that's like, I'm not criticizing anybody who criticizes this trade because there's definitely some inherent risk with it, especially when you're doing so for a non-quarterback, etc. The Browns using 2 of the picks so far on running backs has made me think, like, come on, like Mason Graham and Judkins and Dylan Sampson or Travis Hunter. I'm still probably taking Travis Hunter, dude. Like, and there's not many cases where you can say that where having like one player is better than 3. And I know they'll add a first rounder to that mix next year, etc. But I think Travis Hunter is a freak. I think one of the few players where it can work on both sides of the ball, and I think he landed in a good spot in terms of an organization and forward thinkers like Gladstone, like Coen, who are actually willing to let him try to do this. Because I think some other franchises would probably be, fairly rigid with it. Like, I don't know how much cornerback he would have played with Cleveland just because they seem completely desperate for a wide receiver for Dylan Gabriel or Joe Flacco or Kenny Pickett to throw to. Andrew Berry calling him Shohei Ohtani, trading out of the pick, is one of the funniest draft things to happen in a while. Because that was 2 weeks before the draft. He knew they were probably trading the pick at the time. But, so I think Hunter changes the math, for the Jaguars on both sides of the ball. I can absolutely see him leading in touchdowns just because of how they scheme things up. And then defensively, even if he doesn't play that, if he plays 65% of his snaps on offense and 35% on defense, I think he could still lead them in interceptions, like you said, just because he has crazy ball skills. That's one of the few spots where even if you're playing limited snaps, he can still make game-changing plays.
And especially relative to the rest of the players on the defense, it'll be tough for him to lead the team in touchdowns only because Brian Thomas is also on the team. So it wouldn't be a surprise where even if Travis Hunter gets double-digit touchdowns, Brian Thomas could also have even more. But on defense, certainly they've revamped their secondary, but I think that all of the guys that they've added, as well as Tyson Campbell, who's projected to be the top cornerback on the team still, I feel like none of them quite have the ball skills or the at least defensive statistics generated that Travis Hunter could make. So, even if he's playing 30% of snaps, I don't think it'd be far-fetched for him to lead the team in picks.
100%. Tyson has good ball skills, but Travis is just a freak, dude. Yeah. He's I mean that, one of the most talented players I've ever seen. I'm excited to cover him.
We'll be covering him for the first time this weekend. Rookie minicamp is, I think, May 9th through the 11th. And
Saturday is the first day people, and I don't know how often they've had rookie minicamp open to the public since I've covered them. This might be the first time. So the fact that they're even making that open, it shows you.
I definitely remember watching Brian Thomas last year, inside of their infield field. And so do you have are you looking forward to anything in particular for Travis Hunter this weekend? I assume not, because especially thinking back to last year, Brian Thomas, we all watched him and he wasn't bad, but he wasn't the Brian Thomas that we know of today. He was I don't know. It was rookie minicamp. I feel you can't really get too much out of it, I guess. But it'll certainly be exciting for not just us, but I guess the fans as well, to be able to see number 12 in teal. Last question for you, John. We talked about it before, but on our previous podcast that we have co-hosted together, the Jaguar Report, one of my worst takes was that Ezra Cleveland would be the Jaguars' X-Factor in 2024, which makes even less sense in hindsight. My argument was basically that offensive line is a weak link unit, and Ezra Cleveland I thought was projected to be the worst starter. But if Ezra could have had a good season, then that would have elevated the rest of the group. Yeah, it was all just
No, I think if Ezra had a good season, they would have went 4-13.
All right. So my question for who's the Jaguars' X Factor in 2025?
Travis Hunter.
I should have come up with one on my own.
Travis Hunter. It feels like an easy thing. Trevor Lawrence is the easiest answer, but I'd say Travis Hunter. Just because the turnovers alone, if you can get turnovers, I think that's the biggest way they can turn the defense around. Somehow figure out how to get the ball away, because I think the offense will be explosive enough to where if they get extra opportunities, they will take care of them. They were just so terrible at getting turnovers last year that I just think him being a playmaker on that side of the ball specifically, added on to what he can do on offense, I think Travis Hunter is the X Factor. I'm not positive he's as big of an X Factor as last year's in Ezra Cleveland or next year's in Ross Matisik, but he's my pick this year.
That was a good one. I was trying to think of who the funniest answer would be. My mind was going towards Brenton Strange. Ross Madison. Shout out to Ross, great player, great human, but that's good stuff. All right, John, that's all I got for you today. I really appreciate you joining the show. I'm sure we'll be doing more reunion episodes in the future, but I don't know if you have any lingering thoughts, any lingering takes you want to get off your chest, or if you want to plug anything that you're working on right now over at Jaguars on SI.
Yeah, no, did something the other day, like I said, just comparing the consensus board. A lot of Jags fans screamed at me for just tweeting the updates to the consensus board last year, and then it ended up being an incredibly unproductive rookie class outside of 2.5 players. So I think there's value in it and seeing how the Jaguars did this time. But no, keep doing what you're doing. Proud of you, Gus, and keep listening.
Yeah, will do. I'll keep listening to you. We'll be back at some point. I don't know when it'll be, but John and I will do another reunion, so stay tuned for that. But make sure to check out all of John's work. Best reporter on the beat. I'm a bit biased, but I definitely think it's an objective take too. But yeah, check out all of John's work over at Jaguars on SI. That'll do it for today's show. I'll be back tomorrow at 9:04 a.m. Eastern with Mia O'Brien as we do an official 53-man roster projection for the Jaguars. Their initial 53-man roster usually comes out in like early to mid-August before preseason games start. Is that right? Isn't that right, John?
I'll be honest. Doing this for 6 years, I still have no understanding of the landscape of NFL's offseason schedule.
That's fair. I mean, like we gotta have some time to hibernate. Go get some rest, John. I hope you deserve it for sure. But yeah, 53-man roster projection tomorrow, 9:04 a.m. with Mia O'Brien. So I'll see you guys then, Shipley. I'll see you on Saturday at Rookie Minicamp. Thank you to John. Thank you to our watchers and our listeners and our commenters especially. Catch you guys next time.